It's time for Market Explainer, your number one business news podcast. Hosted by Danny and the big man. And it starts right now.
Before we do any of that, I want to tell you guys about our Patreon. Our full video experience is available on patreon.com/marketexplainer. We're going to be loading up more content on there. We want you to join. There's a bunch
The new year is going to see a lot that explode. That is
Correct.
my project, which we both know, and I'm interrupting an ad to say this, but we both know that for it to grow, I've got to be involved with it. Danny,
Correct.
for whatever reason, cannot handle doing anything on a regular basis. So
that's right.
It is the Patreon and the growth of that is definitely my project.
I just came up with the idea for the show. I came up with the name of the show. I just come up with the stories of the show. That's all I do. I don't do anything.
What have you done for me lately? But anyway, Patreon, lots of cool stuff.
Yes.
MarketExplainer.com.
That's right. So, like I was saying, we're just going to jump right into it. Pfizer is making an acquisition in the medical cannabis space with a $6.7 billion acquisition of Arena Pharmaceuticals. Now,
okay, before you get into that, can we back up for a second? Because Danny, as you all know, Danny creates his own headlines for these stories that he acquires and puts them where him and I look at these things or whatever.
Yes.
His actual headline that he wrote for me was, an embattled Pfizer is taking its recent found mega profits and investing it in this fun time activity. First of all, why is it embattled Pfizer?
Well, I would say that in the last 2 years, Pfizer's reputation has, in the public's eye, and this is it became because pharmaceuticals got politicized, and in the last year or two, people have begun to have a not great opinion of Pfizer.
I disagree wholeheartedly, but that's
okay.
And this is why I'm bringing it up.
Okay, so let me put it this way. In the grand scheme of things in America, the political spectrums switched, and Team Blue, which used to hate pharmaceutical companies, and Team Red, which was like, we love capitalism, switched and said, these people are evil and injecting us with whatever. And these other people are like, can we get 4 of them? Why is it only 2? Can we get 3 or 7?
I think everybody should hate pharmaceutical companies just because they literally, and this is a great example, and I've said this before on this podcast, and it's true, there's not a single drug that the United States has on the market behind counters of pharmacies that was actually created by pharmaceutical companies. They were all created by public funds through universities and grants and that kind of stuff, and then they are acquired much like what we are talking about today.
Correct.
They go out in these small little companies, in this case, the American multinational pharmaceutical and
it's called Arena Pharmaceuticals, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Arena Pharmaceuticals in this case is a grant funded, trying to come up with a new drug for and I say new drug. It's a molecular speaking cannabinoid therapy for the digestive system, which is nobody cares about. The point is
your digestive
Pfizer
gut health is extremely important.
No, it's very important, but nobody cares about the science. I'm here. The fact is, the headline is that Pfizer getting into the marijuana game, the Mary Jane game, through acquiring a company that has already started trials using a part of it. They don't care about this little bitty gut drug. What they want is the research labs and the approvals and all the things that this company has so that they can start pumping in R&D dollars to develop more Mary Jane types of drugs moving forward.
So let me just say this. I have never in my entire life partaken of this, the herb, because I was asthmatic when I was, and I've been an asthma guy. I've had asthma my whole life. And I was always worried about my, wastoid buddies who was going to be like, if I have a reaction, be like, hey man, you got to drive me to the ER. Be like, what, bro? What's going on, man? Like, do you want, like, I have Lay's with Ridges and some Pringles. And I'm like, oh, God. You know what I'm saying? So In my later age, though, I've opened up to the concept of
That is such a 1980s version of what you just did right there. Like
That's
that
very
is straight
true.
out of the,
Yeah.
marijuana's a gateway drug, the
Yes, yes,
whole
yes. And
dare, all
listen,
of it.
when I was 18 or 19, I bought into that. By the time I was 20, I was like, government's stupid. But and so I've been pro legalization or pre decriminalization at the very least for a long time. And in my lifetime, it went from highly illegal to state, like legalized at a state level.
Sure.
And here's what the argument was like, well, the reason that they won't do that, the reason they will legalize is actually because the pharmaceutical companies, they can't make millions of billions of dollars on it. I'm like, you're stupid, because they will take part of the cannabinoid molecular structure and they'll inject it with some other crap. And people don't understand how patents, like, it's really just like, well, this used to use Velcro, now it uses a magnet. It's a new patent, right?
Right.
And
well, that's the whole thing. That's the pharmaceutical industry. Like,
and like
but
people
the
don't
fact
understand, and people who don't take pharmaceutical drugs. So I have inhalers for my asthma, and the inhaler that I got was the same my whole life. But then the patent ran out on it, and then everybody could make one. And then what's this? The pharma companies went to the government and said, well, these inhalers are bad for the environment. So the government said, you have to use a specific type of inhaler that isn't bad for the environment.
Yep.
And then the pharmaceutical companies get to go, well, hey, look at this. We have a new patent to file. And that's so like the inhaler changed when I was like 26 or something. And
to the HFA inhalers. Yeah.
Correct.
I know. Yeah.
Right. So that they could get a new, it was literally just a scheme for them to get a new piece of intellectual property, IP, that they could monetize. So I was paying $5 to get them. And now they're $50 a month, right?
Because of the mechanism, not even the drug itself. Correct. It's exactly the same as what you used.
And it doesn't
work
as good. It does not work as good. But if you ever travel to a foreign country, you can walk into a pharmacy, write on a piece of paper what you want, and they'll just give it to you. And it's the original one, which I like better. So as someone who lives not too far from the Mexican border, I occasionally am,
He didn't say that. No. Well, look, here's the point. This is why I said at the beginning that no one should like the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, no one.
Right, but let me just, what I was trying to get at was, if there's a way for them to carve out a mechanism to make money with something that listen, your wastoid pothead friends don't understand the nuances of intellectual property and economics. And what I was trying to inform them of is, hey, pal, it doesn't matter. They'll find a way, bro. Evil pharma execs find a way. All right?
Well, absolutely they would. But here's the deal. This, to me, is yet another example. This now gives Pfizer and other... Look, they're not the only ones. Johnson & Johnson bought a company very similar to this a couple of years ago. A Canadian research R&D company bought a different one in 2017. An old Tilray, which is big in Canada and Europe, bought a different company very similar to this a couple of years ago as well. So in the last 3 or 4 years, now this gives Big Pharma...
Right.
a reason to now put pressure on the United States government to
approve legalization,
to approve legalization, and this gives them that inside step, right?
Right.
And they look. I'm a capitalist. Legalize it all and just tax the hell out of it. So leave it. Let everybody make money.
Legalize it all. Don't tax anything, because that's stealing.
That's not. No, it's not. Anyway, the point. A completely different conversation. So look, this is them going, because look, they can make a lot of money in a lot of different ways. They don't need cannabis to make money. They don't need Mary Jane to make money. However, if they think it's going to get legalized and it's yet another way for them to make money, then I'm in. Right? Yeah. Like that's where this is at to me.
They don't need cannabis to make money, because they can just get the government to force you to take their stuff. So why would they want a job? Buy our thing.
Okay, we're not getting into Danny's conspiracy theories. The point is they look. this is why I say nobody should like pharmaceutical companies, but and I don't even know that they're necessary, but they are a
Right.
capitalist thing in that they bring medications that come out of these, these research and
Research.
R&D, these little
Yeah.
grants, and they bring it to the population. That's what
Right.
what we call big pharma.
Correct.
That's what
Yeah.
it does. That's
Yes.
its purpose, is actually not to create drugs, but to bring it to the big
Right.
market. And
Well,
that is a lot of money, right?
yeah,
To
and it costs something like $1 billion just to get a drug through the FDA.
Right.
Okay. And so here's the thing: as a guy who believes in a pure free market, I end up in this weird nexus, like type of the nexus of the universe, where I go, well, hey, listen, I am a person who has personally benefited from pharmaceuticals. I am a big proponent of free markets. And here's where I think a lot of people, the reason they hate them is because, listen, they have an army of attorneys, and it's just part of being in the drug business. And if you have a sector of your business that is sitting dormant as a means of defense, and you can deploy them while they're not defending, and you can deploy them offensively to go file IP patents and develop intellectual property, which the value of IP strictly comes from the government saying no one else can do this. That's it.
right.
It's not a mechanism of a free market, it's a mechanism of a regulated market. So
It promises an ROI, right? So a
right.
medical
So
patent, if
that's
you come up with a new drug, the
right.
FDA gives you 10 years to make as much
Right.
money as you want, and then after that 10 years, if nothing changes, right?
Right.
Then that patent can go to generics, and other generic manufacturers can make it
Right.
that
But
formula, right?
even that formulation still ends up in the hands of generic manufacturers, and they still pay licensing on that. So there's it's not like
Oh,
purely
absolutely. They don't just, hey, you can't make any money off this anymore. But
correct.
look, this is where, again, I, along with you, get in this nexus, because if you
Yeah.
and I sold a product believing what you and I believe,
Right.
if I can get somebody to spend $100 on a T-shirt, then I should be able
Right.
to let someone pay me $100 for a T-shirt.
Correct.
However, when you get to a company gets to a certain size, the population, the general population, especially the last couple of years, has decided that you should no longer be able to say, hey, give me $100 for this T-shirt,
Right.
and be able to take that. You have a responsibility to do the right thing and sell that T-shirt for $20 instead of $100, because you're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Well, so here's here's what I think. Right. I think the problem is I'm not buying the T-shirt. I have clothing insurance, which is a stupid concept, but I have clothing insurance, and my clothing insurance says, okay, you get X number of T-shirts a month or a year.
Right.
We'll let you have 8 T-shirts a year. So instead of the T-shirt, which you would sell me for $100, which is an amazing profit for you, and you're happy, the clothing insurance company goes, how much is it? It's $1,250. I guess his premiums are going up next year.
Right. We'll give you 250 and
Yeah,
collect the rest from him.
correct.
No,
So
and
that's
I
the
get
problem.
that that's a portion of it, but
Yes.
still, in totality, we have
Right.
a for whatever reason, and look, we're doing this with millionaires too, right? Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and everybody else. We're
Billionaires.
saying
Yeah.
that they should, trillionaires, billionaires, millionaire,
Yeah.
like there's this mentality that because you're a big company, you have a moral responsibility. I just don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because if it wouldn't apply to you in small business, then it would be unfair to, because if you, the whole goal of any small business is to become a medium business and then a
Right.
large business.
Correct.
So
Otherwise,
are
what are we doing here with our dicks in our hands? What's the
are
point?
you going to have that same responsibility
Yeah,
if
and
you
so
succeed in going from small, medium to large? I don't know.
that's more of a socio-political question, and my answer to that is no. Your moral obligation is to do what you want, and most human beings are like, no one wakes up in the morning and says, "Man, I really hope I can make $1 million this new year, so I can give 400,000 of it, so the government can go buy something I don't even want them to have." Or like,
Well, and tell you that whatever it is you're selling can't be sold for that much money because
yeah.
you have a moral obligation to lower the cost of it, right?
So right, so and here's the other thing I will point out. Companies are not going to manufacture and sell goods that no one will buy because they're too expensive. I'm just giving an example to people. If you look at the cost of pharmaceuticals and the ease of getting them in countries that aren't the United States, not if you're looking at the countries outside of the Western world, my family is from India. They travel back there often. It's perfectly legal and responsible. You can go and buy your prescription drugs while you're there. I know people in my family who have diabetes. Their drugs are $600, $700, $800 a month with their insurance, with with everything you can get on it. And they go there and they can buy a year's supply of medication for $100. And you look at the package, it's made in the good old US of A. It's made right here. It's not some knockoff from there. It's literally made right here. And, there's 1,000 reasons why it's that expensive. But the reality is, if you make anything in this country that nobody can afford to buy, what's the point? Nobody will make that. But the point is, there's a mechanism for Pfizer, Merck, any of these big companies to get you to buy something. And that's forced through legalization, all these other different ways that they can get you to buy something that is at an inflated cost. So the lack of a free market in pharmaceuticals, and I'm going to say there isn't a free market because they're allowed to go to because they're allowed to go to the government. The government backs. So it's just
and there's only a half a dozen companies. You just said it's $1 million to get through, $1 billion to get through the FDA. This company that just got bought out, right? The Arena Pharmaceuticals. They weren't going to be able to afford the $1 billion to get this drug through the FDA, right? There's a half a dozen companies in the entire United States that can afford to do that. Pfizer and Merck and Johnson Johnson, and
that's because if you have 10 drugs, that's 10 billion you're trying to get through.
Well, and at any given time, they all have multiple of these things going on because it's a rolling wheel of what's coming out this year, next year, right, or whatever.
So all I'm getting at is Mexico. We're in Texas. There are people who I know personally who make a nice vacation out of a trip to go get drugs every year, and I'm talking about their prescription drugs.
I don't know anybody like this. This is 100% on Danny. I don't know anybody like this. Go ahead.
No, because I think it's a 90-day supply or 180-day supply you're allowed to buy legally across the border. And the people that I know, they're very responsible. They take the prescriptions with them. So they have every right and reason to do that. When I used to live up in Minnesota, the former senator, I think it was Paul Wellstone, used to load up a bus of elderlies and take them to Canada to buy their prescription drugs.
Yeah, no, personal use and stuff like that. Look, they are allotted. And if you live in an area, if you live close to Mexico, if you live close to Canada, then it's convenient. If you don't, then it can be much more difficult as a process. And that's their whole point is if you live in northern Oklahoma and you have a prescription that's $1,000 a month, how do I get it from Canada or Mexico? And you don't, right?
Yeah.
But to bring it back to this story, look, the story is actually a good story for Pfizer and for this company, for Arena Pharmaceuticals.
Right.
Pfizer is giving them, you and I have talked a lot about
huge acquisitions.
Acquisitions, right, here recently in the last year and stuff like that. And we've also talked a lot about these stock acquisitions where really they're giving you $0, right? Because until you sell it, it's $0 in your pocket. They're swapping stock, But in this case, it's an all-cash transaction for $100 a share.
Well, $6.7 billion is like me going for Pfizer, especially after the last 2 years they've had. Just, great for their balance sheet. It's like me going to fill up gas and going, I guess I'll get premium today. That's it.
That's it. But that's is they're giving them cash, which is rare in today's world, right? And they're essentially, and what that tells me though, again, going back to what they think the future is, right? With Mary Jane and cannabis and all this kind of stuff, is they think this is the future because they're willing to spend that $7 billion, scratch out a check. I'm buying everybody out of this company. There's no one that's going to maintain any ownership in this company. Whoever has been running the show, owning the show, investing in this show is gone. They have no say. This is a Pfizer show from here on out. Tells me that they're not only dipping a toe in,
but they're in
they're going all in.
They're knee deep today.
Right.
But they're going all the way in.
It's not a new thing for the pharmaceutical industry, but I think Pfizer getting in, I think you'll see in the very near future Merck get in as well. Johnson and Johnson, like I said, is already in. Big Tobacco, which is, it's weird to talk about Big Tobacco and Big Pharma in the same story, but Big Tobacco still is getting into this industry, the cannabinoid industry as well.
Yeah, as they should.
Trying to make that transition because they already have the pipeline. They already have the manufacturing. They already have, you're just replacing one substance for another substance. So it makes sense, right? You have and that's essentially what you're doing here is you're laying groundwork for an infrastructure for a drug that's not there yet.
And I think that, when legalization comes around, which I think we're 2 to 4 years away from federal legalization. When it actually happens, you're going to want both sides of it. You're going to want the pharmaceutical applications and the, recreational applications as well.
It wouldn't surprise me, and again, this is not a political show, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is something that comes up early to mid 2022 that gets pushed through all by itself, not attached to a whole bunch of other stuff, but all by itself as a midterm elections kind of win. Because it's very popular, right? It's very popular.
And the former president was at the outset of his when it looked like when he actually had already won, was talking about this is something that he wanted to do was federal legalization, and which was weird coming from that side of the aisle, and it was just one of those things where he picked a lot of bad people and it couldn't happen, but that would have been a win.
But that's what I'm saying. It's an easy win for the person that pushes it through, and if you did it all by itself. And then you could turn around and you could let a certain population out of certain 8x9 places, apartments, that are attached to it, and say, "Hey,
apartments is a wild way to say it, bro."
I'm just saying. I'm trying to say it without saying it, but you could combine those two things, and it looks like a big win. That's very popular, by the way. It's very popular with the general public.
Yes, it's actually very popular with both Team Red and Team Blue, actually.
Exactly. That's all. That's all I'm saying. It would not surprise me. Spring of next year, it just goes, "Hey, we're going to run this through real quick." You know what I mean? We're going to write as many articles as we can about it, talk about it, whatever. But
it's going to make them look so good.
Bam, 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 bam. Right, and it would be one of those. Anyway, just my thought. Could happen, and that's what it'll take for a state like Texas to get on board. By the way, Texas will never. Which
bothers me about living. That's the only thing. Otherwise, I love everything about it. But
you have to take with the good, the bad.
That's right. We're going to move on to this next story.